I want you to picture something. You're standing on a wooden platform. It's cold. Maybe it's that damp English mist.
You've got a rope around your neck, a hood over your head.
You can hear the crowd. The priest is muttering a final prayer. You brace yourself. The executioner pulls the lever. And
Nothing.
absolutely nothing.
The trapdoor just stays shut. You're still standing there.
So they think, okay, faulty mechanism. They move you off. They test it.
And it works perfectly. Clunk.
So they put you back on, hood on, rope tight, pull the lever again, and...
Again, nothing. The earth just refuses to swallow you.
And just to make sure the universe is really, making a point, they try it a third time.
And for a third time, the machine fails.
It sounds like a ghost story, doesn't it? But this is a real historical event.
Yeah.
This is the story of John Babbacombe Lee.
The man they couldn't hang.
Exactly. It's one of the most bizarre true crime stories from the Victorian era. But our way into this story today is a little different. Very different. We're not looking at court transcripts. We are exploring this story through a 1971 album by the British folk rock legends Fairport Convention.
The album is called Babbacombe Lee.
And this isn't just, a song about a guy. This is a massive conceptual piece of work. We're talking about a band known for jigs and reels.
Traditional stuff.
Suddenly pivoting to make what is, well, arguably the first folk rock opera.
It was a huge risk. I mean, a truly massive commercial gamble.
Yeah.
They went from having chart success to releasing this continuous grim narrative about a murder and a botched hanging.
Which is a fascinating mix, isn't it? History, music, and maybe a complete lack of business sense.
The best combination.
I love it. So let's get into the why. Why this story? Did they just find it in a library?
You'd think so, given how detailed it is.
Yeah.
But the origin of this whole project is almost as strange as the story of John Lee itself. It all starts with Dave Swarbrick.
The fiddle player.
Right, the fiddle player and vocalist. Swarbrick was a bit of a collector. He loved old things. One day he's digging through a dusty old junk shop.
As one does.
And he spots this file. Just a bundle of old papers, newspaper clippings.
Which for a folk musician is basically treasure anyway.
Oh, exactly. But he opens it up and realizes this isn't random. These clippings are all about the John Lee case. The murder, the trial, the failed hanging. But here's the kicker.
Okay.
This is where it gets spooky. The file wasn't put together by some journalist or a history buff.
Who was it?
It was compiled by John Babbacombe Lee himself.
Wait, what? Swarbrick just walks into a random junk shop and finds the personal scrapbook of the man the story's about?
Signed and dated by him, 30 January 1908. John Lee had cut out these articles, bound them together, and kept them. Swarbrick was literally holding the primary source material.
That is wildly improbable. It's almost like the story wanted to be found.
It really feels that way.
Yeah.
And that discovery completely changed the project. In folk music, we talk about the oral tradition.
Right, songs passed down, changing over time.
It's like a game of telephone over centuries. The truth gets fuzzy. But here, Fairport wasn't working from a fuzzy legend. They were working from the man's own archive.
So they weren't just singers anymore. They were historians, in a way.
They were adapting his scrapbook into a musical script, documenting a life.
So let's look at that life. The album is structured like a play, isn't it? It follows a clear timeline.
Strictly chronological. And to really get the music, you have to understand the arc of Lee's life as the band lays it out.
So Act 1, where do we start? He wasn't always this apparent criminal, as the press called him.
No, not at all. The first part of the album deals with his innocence. It touches on his boyhood poverty, sure, but it really highlights his time in the Royal Navy.
I remember reading that the tracks describe this as the happiest period in his life.
And you can hear it in the music. It's got this energy, this sense of purpose. He's escaped poverty. He has a uniform, a role, but then circumstance hits.
He gets sick.
He's invalided out of the Navy.
That's such a brutal turn. You finally get out, and then your own body lets you down.
And that's the setup for the fall. He goes from the structure of the Navy to just drifting through menial jobs. He's desperate. And that desperation is what leads him to the Glennis.
Which sounds like the title of a horror movie.
It might as well be. It's the home of Miss Keyes. Lee enters her service. And that brings us to Act 2, the crime.
Miss Keyes is murdered.
Brutally. And the whole mood of the album shifts here. It stops being about Lee's inner world and starts reflecting this external hysteria. The Victorian press went absolutely wild.
I can imagine. kind old mistress slain by the villainous servant.
It was the 1885 equivalent of a viral Netflix true crime series. Everybody had a take.
And the music reflects that chaos.
Completely.
Yeah.
You got Dave Swarbrick's fiddle and instrument, usually associate with, a happy dance tune.
On Jake, yeah.
And suddenly it's making this screeching claustrophobic sound. It's not melody, it's pure tension.
So that brings us to the trial. How does the album portray Lee in all this? Is he fighting for his life?
That's the fascinating part. The sources describe him as a bewildered observer. The legal system is just this huge grinding machine, and he's just watching it happen to him.
He's passive.
Completely.
Yeah.
The lyrics, the music, it all conveys this sense of helplessness. He's not a participant. He's a victim of the process.
Which leads him to the condemned cell and those 3 sad weeks waiting to die.
And this is where the songwriting gets incredibly psychological. They don't just sing, oh, he was sad. They focus on his sleep or lack of it. And there's this specific moment called the dream song.
Tell me about that.
Well, you have to imagine the strain. You know the exact date you're going to die. But the album describes Lee having this strange prophetic dream. It's almost mystical.
A defense mechanism, maybe?
It seems like it. This dream helps him bear the strain. It's as if his own mind created something to get him through the horror of it all. It adds this whole other layer to the story.
And then comes the morning of the execution. The track Wake Up John.
Chilling title, isn't it?
It is.
And this is the climax we talked about. The gallows. The 3 attempts. The failure. And finally, a reprieve. He's released because the machine just refused to work.
Let's talk about the format of this album, because in 1971, this was unusual. If I bought this record, I'd expect a list of tracks on the back.
And you would be very confused. The original LP didn't list any separate tracks. It was just side 1 and side 2.
So you couldn't skip to your favorite song?
No skipping. There were no bands on the vinyl, those little gaps between songs. It was one continuous piece of music. The band was forcing you to listen to the whole story in order.
That is a bold move, basically saying, sit down and listen to our opera.
It really is. In fact, the book The Electric Muse argues that this is the first folk rock opera.
That's a huge claim. People always point to The Who's Tommy.
Well, sure, Tommy is the famous rock opera.
Yeah.
But in the folk world, this was completely new. They took traditional instruments and stretched them over a 40-minute conceptual narrative. It wasn't a collection of songs. It was a single, cohesive piece of musical theater.
I have seen the CD version, though, and that does have track titles.
Oh, yeah. Later on, they broke it down. For sanity's sake, the later CDs have titles like The Verdict or Cell Song, but that was a retroactive change. The original artistic intent was total immersion.
You're trapped in the story.
Just like Lee was trapped in the cell.
So who is in the band at this point? To pull off something this tight, you need a really solid lineup.
This was the 4 Daves plus Simon era, basically.
Sounds like a pub quiz team.
It really does. You had Dave Swarbrick on fiddle and vocals, Dave Pegg on bass, Dave Matax on drums, and Simon Nicole on guitar and vocals. A really stripped-back unit.
And focused, I imagine.
Incredibly focused. They'd been through a lot of lineup changes, so this quartet had this almost telepathic connection. They had to. The music on this album shifts constantly to follow the story. If they weren't locked in, the whole thing would just fall apart.
So you've got a tight band, a killer story, a groundbreaking format. This thing must have been a massive hit.
You would think so. I mean, their previous album, Angel Delight, was a chart success. They had all this momentum.
And then they drop a concept album about a Victorian hanging.
And the market just went, nope.
How bad was it?
Pretty bad. In the U.S., Babbacombe Lee peaked at number 195 on the Billboard chart.
195, that's barely even on the chart.
It was a commercial disappointment, to put it mildly. And you have to remember the context. The average listener wanted another Angel Delight. They wanted catchy folk rock. Instead, they got this grim, complex, demanding historical drama.
It's that classic tension, isn't it? Art versus commerce. The critics got the ambition, but the record-buying public just wanted something to tap their feet to.
Exactly. But the story of the album didn't end there. There's this interesting little postscript.
The lost tracks?
Right. So a few years later, in 1974, the BBC decides to make a documentary about John Lee.
A proper one.
Yeah, narrated by Melvin Bragg. And they asked the band to provide some music. But by then, the lineup had changed again. Simon Nicole had actually left, but he came back just for this project. And this is the holy grail for folk fans. Sandy Denny was involved.
No way. Sandy Denny is folk royalty.
She is the voice of British folk rock. She sang on a track called Breakfast in Mayfair just for this documentary. So those tracks ended up on later reissues of the album. It's a lovely little coda.
And the album itself, it seems like it got a second life. It didn't just disappear.
No, it became a cult classic. The real vindication came in 2011 for the 40th anniversary. Fairport decided to perform the entire album, start to finish, live.
That's a huge undertaking.
They did it on tour and at their big annual festival, Property. And the crowd absolutely loved it. It kind of proved the album wasn't a failure. It was just...
Ahead of its time.
Or maybe it just needed an audience that was finally ready to sit down and really listen.
It's amazing how time changes our idea of success. A flop in 1971, a masterpiece today.
And it just highlights what made that band so special. They could have played it safe, made Angel to Light Part 2, but they followed the story. They honored that dusty file from the junk shop. They put the history ahead of the hit single.
I keep coming back to that central moment. The machine failing.
It's the pivot point of his entire life.
We live in a world where we just expect things to work, you know? You flip a switch, the light comes on, we trust mechanics.
Or rely on them completely.
But in this story, the mechanics failed 3 times. And in the narrative, that failure isn't seen as a glitch, it's seen as a miracle.
Divine intervention. Fate stepping in.
It raises this strange, provocative question for me. In John Lee's story, a rusty bolt or a swollen piece of wood, a simple mechanical error, becomes the hand of God. It saves a life.
It certainly changed the course of his history.
So how much of our history is just that? How many huge events, how many lives saved or lost, just come down to a small physical thing not working the way it was designed to?
That's a big thought. We like to think history is about grand decisions and powerful people, but maybe sometimes it really is just a lever that gets stuck.
Was it a miracle? Or was it just bad maintenance? And if the result is that you get to live?
Does the difference even matter?
I guess for John Lee and for us listening to his story, the result is the only thing that does.
Something to think about.
Thanks for exploring the strange, dusty, and ultimately resilient world of Babbacombe Lee with us.
It was a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.